know everything about each other. What's my last name? God damn it.
In Breast Cancer Show Ever, after Wendy B.
What it is, guys? It's your boy BlastphamousHD, and today we are here to check out a video called Jimmy Valmer, Comedy as a Crutch. Now make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video because I tell a story about one of my homeboys that I became cool with in Joshua Village projects. I tell this hilarious story about my homeboy that I was friends with in the project that reminds me so much of Jimmy, not by the way he walked, but by the way he talked. He had a crazy heavy lisp. We're gonna put the story at the end of the video like a Marvel superhero movie. Let's do this.
Jimmy Valmer wasn't introduced in South Park until season 5, but since then he's become one of the most prominent kids outside of the main 4. In fact, outside of Butters, I think he may have the most episodes focused on him out of any other kid in South Park. And there's good reason for that. Jimmy is an incredibly well-rounded character, he's super funny, and his interests and moral compass create a ton of narrative possibilities in the show. So today, let's dive into everything that makes Jimmy Valmer one of the most likable kids in South Park.
Jimmy Swanson. Jimmy Valmer.
Jimmy's introduction in Season 5's Cripple Fight is pretty iconic, but it's also kind of amazing for introducing nearly every facet of Jimmy's personality almost immediately. Some things were a bit more subtle and expanded on later, but just about everything we love about Jimmy was there in his very first episode. Interestingly, Jimmy's last name is first revealed to be Swanson in the episode Crazy Cripples, but was later changed to Valmer. South Park has a habit of changing character names. Detective Harris later became Sergeant Harrison Yates. Token Williams is now Tolkien Black.
Token Black? Jimmy is related to Joe Swanson from Family Guy? Damn.
Or no, I guess he was always Tolkien, right? And honestly, this could be any combination of a mistake, laziness, mind changing, etc. It's not that big a deal. Jimmy was even seemingly meant to be a one-off character, a single episode rival to Timmy. He first appears in the kids' scout troop, implying that he doesn't go to school with them, and he's basically framed as a motivational speaker.
I travel to different states and talk to kids about being proud of what they are.
Though never confirmed in the series, it's speculated that Jimmy most likely has the condition Pfeiffer syndrome, based on his physical appearance. And honestly, the show treats Jimmy really well. He's not ashamed or insecure about his disability, he embraces it, and he even makes light fun of himself to break the ice.
My mom says God has a plan for everyone. I guess I was plan B.
And though it isn't explicitly stated, it seems like Jimmy's strong sense of humor may have in part become prominent as a means to make friends, which obviously can be more difficult for kids with disabilities. His comedy pretty instantly endears him to the other kids at Scouts.
Jimmy's funny, dude. Yeah, well, he's the coolest kid with disabilities in the world.
As I mentioned, this episode introduces just about everything that would become a prominent aspect of Jimmy's character and personality as he evolved and was featured more often over the series. Obviously, the major one being his love of stand-up comedy and performing, but the episode also showcases how likable and genuinely nice he is, and how easily he makes friends. However, Jimmy also has some pretty significant rivalries, and baked right into this episode is Timmy's jealousy towards Jimmy, creating a major rift and causing them to fight. That's what the whole episode's about. And lastly, though a bit less focused on, is the fact that Jimmy has a very strong moral compass. He will almost always fight for what he believes is right, showcased in this one by his attempts to help get Big Gay Al reinstated as their scout leader. Though there are definitely exceptions in certain stories, these seem to be the biggest things that define Jimmy as a character. And the character was so well received and so well liked by Matt and Trey that they ended up dropping him into small roles in other episodes, allowing all of these ideas introduced in his debut to be expanded on. And eventually, he was a big part of countless amazing episodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Jimmy!
Thank you. Wow, what a terrific audience.
Obviously, first and foremost, Jimmy's major focus is stand-up comedy, and there's at least half a dozen episodes that revolve around this to some degree, and there are countless smaller moments in other episodes that highlight this interest as well, like his second ever appearance in How to Eat With Your Butt. When Cartman loses his ability to laugh after seeing people with butts for faces, he goes to Jimmy for some quality comedy to make him laugh.
Why did the pigeon cross the road?
Okay, why?
Because it was having sex with the chick. Because it was having sex with the chick.
The entire inciting incident for Jimmy's second major episode, Crazy Cripples, is that he's angry his friends decided to go see Christopher Reeve instead of supporting him at his stand-up comedy show.
Christopher Reeve?
You know Christopher Reeve, the guy who played Superman?
I know who he is!
Though the episode didn't ultimately revolve around stand-up, it's often a major part of his storylines. In Douche and Turd, the kids specifically ask Jimmy which write-in candidate is funnier, a giant douche or a turd sandwich, because they respect his opinion as a comedian. He opts for Giant Douche.
They're both instant classics, but I guess I'll have to go with Giant Douche, simply because the fact that it's a giant renders it useless, adding a parody slant to the satire.
I think this also goes a long way to show how serious Jimmy takes his comedy, and the lengths he would go to perform that stand-up unimpeded is probably best showcased in Season 9's Erection Day. When Jimmy starts getting erections in class, and fears that it will happen to him during his stand-up routine at the talent show, he goes far out of his way to try and fix the problem by hiring a prostitute, thanks to some bad advice from Officer Barbrady. He then gets into a high-speed chase, he is shot in the process, all so that he can secure this woman's services. But there's probably no better episode about Jimmy's joke writing than the all-timer Fish Sticks.
Say, Eric, do you like fish sticks? Yeah? You like putting fish sticks in your mouth? Yeah? Well, what are you, Eric? A gay fish?
This is one of the best examples because it shows how deeply Jimmy cares about the craft of joke writing. He sets time aside in his day to craft new jokes, he workshops them, and ultimately, he's just happy that he's come up with such a successful and groundbreaking gag. Until other people start taking credit for it, which we will talk about more later. Jimmy even hosts the Comedy Awards in the episode Funnybot, winning the award for funniest kid in school, but also deeply angering the Germans in the process, who then create Funnybot. Jimmy is the only one early on to see the damage Funnybot is going to do with his comedy.
Honestly, I hate having to do homework more than I hate having to do Bryant Gumbel in his asshole. Awkward.
And even though it was fictional, the fact that Jimmy so deeply ties comedy to the origin for his superhero character in franchise prequel and The Fractured But Whole says a lot about how integral it is in his life.
Your newborn son will never be able to walk, but he will be extremely good at comedy.
Wow, what a terrific audience.
I mean, just think about a late night talk show host. Any late night talk show host. Any late night talk show host that is currently on the air. There is like a 50% chance that that guy's name is Jimmy. In fact, canonically, Jimmy becomes a late night talk show host in the future, which truly feels like the most perfect combination of so many of Jimmy's attributes.
What is up with these bisexual Canadians, huh? I guess they don't know whether to fuck their brother or their sister.
But one of the coolest things South Park did was expand Jimmy's performing skills outside of comedy. Music, in particular, is something Jimmy's shown to be extremely adept at. Even his role in South Park: The Stick of Truth is a bard. He's shown to play both the lute and the flute in that game. His attacks and abilities are almost entirely built around playing music.
Prepare for battle, weaklings. Elves, fall in.
On top of this, at summer camp, Jimmy performs a great musical number for everyone else with his ukulele.
So I made up my mind that I'd strike a band, the cocky girl I need a dog.
He also plays drums in the band Crimson Dawn with Stan, Butters, and Kenny.
And a one, and a two, and a...
And of course, he serenades the entire town with his singing voice for the 12 Days of Christmas in Red Sleigh Down.
On the fourth day of Christmas, my true love gay.
Jimmy is also co-anchor of the school news in Quest for Ratings, showing not just his performing abilities, but foreshadowing his future gig on television. As does the fact that he tries to give Kyle his headshot when he thinks that he runs Hollywood. He also joins the boys in starting a wrestling league, giving a dramatic performance in the ring. There is just a huge variety of types of performing on Jimmy's resume. There's nobody else in South Park who even comes close. But alongside these various performing roles, whether it's stand-up, acting, or hosting, come a wide variety of relationships. And though Jimmy makes tons of friends along the way, he also makes a lot of enemies. Even in that very first appearance, Jimmy made a great impression on the other boys. They instantly took to Jimmy and were excited to spend more time with him, but he also sparked some massive jealousy in Timmy, who even tried to kill Jimmy by making him wear one of Kenny's parkas. And to be fair, though Jimmy is mostly a really nice kid, he did make fun of Timmy through his comedy.
Timmy! Timmy! I'm living a lie, Timmy!
Obviously, this culminated in the huge fight between Jimmy and Timmy, probably the meanest and angriest we've ever seen Jimmy. He really does bring out intense emotions from the people around him. Many really like him, but many really hate him. Timmy even gets Jimmy kicked out of the Scouts by photoshopping a lewd picture of him, which felt like Matt and Trey writing him out of the show for his one-off appearance. Obviously, even those dudes liked him enough to bring him back. He really is a likable fella. In season 6, after Kenny's untimely death, and then also after the boys fire Butters from their friend group, Jimmy was part of their bachelor-style dating show to find a new fourth friend. This was early on in Jimmy's life in South Park, and overall, he made a solid impression.
I think the person that stood out most at the amusement park was Jimmy.
Honestly, in these earlier appearances, Jimmy wasn't quite as sure of himself as we would see him become later. He's typically known as a very kind and genuine guy, but he comes across as a bit desperate and phony in this friend competition.
Just one more rose, Kev.
Jimmy.
Oh boy! Oh, thank God!
He obviously makes it into the final round, so the boys clearly like Jimmy well enough, but the uncharacteristic desperation kinda sinks his chances.
Hey, fellas, I was just in the neighborhood and I thought I'd stop by this gift basket. Oh, thanks, Jimmy.
Maybe Jimmy became more aware of this desperation, because it seems like after this he becomes very confident in who he is, especially through making new friends. Even though his inaugural appearance ends with Timmy still loathing him, even that doesn't last. We never actually see the pair become friends, but by the next Jimmy-focused episode, he and Timmy are besties and remain that way throughout the rest of the series. And the entire episode is about them making wildly unlikely friends. Though the major inciting incident for these new friends is Jimmy fully resenting Christopher Reeve for getting so much attention for his handicap. Jimmy feels like it isn't fair that Reeve gets so much attention when he wasn't born with his handicap, while people like Timmy and Jimmy get no attention, which is sort of an interesting inverse of his initial appearance, where Timmy was jealous of Jimmy getting attention. Jimmy and Timmy mistakenly join the Crips thinking they're a handicap club. Jimmy's significant confidence in himself and his genuine nature get him accepted by a gang.
The only real Crips is born Crips, dawg.
I agree. I mean, it's like, come on.
This episode does highlight Jimmy's ignorance a bit. He obviously had no idea what he was actually getting himself into. He and Timmy get credit for taking out a huge crew of Bloods when they were actually just trying to get snacks for the Crips, which also made a big difference in how they perceived him.
And they got us marshmallows and ginger ale.
And with this genuine attitude and complete confidence in who he is, he literally got the Crips and Bloods to forgive each other with a lock-in at the rec center.
What did you say?
I said, come on.
You know, maybe he's right. I mean, come on.
Jimmy's earnest and genuine nature is truly one of his best qualities, and it clearly shines through for lots of different people. Even him telling jokes to Cartman to try and fix his ability to laugh was just a really kind thing to do for a not very kind person. Jimmy is shown to hang out with a ton of different kids. In Good Times with Weapons, he's hanging out with Craig Tolkien and Clyde.
What's the matter, fellas? Are you ninjas or pussies?
He's even on the baseball team, and he's just as depressed when they have to play in the playoffs as all the other kids.
All the other teams are worse than us.
Yeah, let's face it. We're winners.
Jimmy is even shown to be pretty good with women. In Up the Down Steroid, he's dating a girl named Nancy. He goes on a couple really good dates in Erection Day before he ruins them, which is mostly out of his ignorance of the situation he finds himself in, and less because he's an actual asshole. Before that, the dates were going really well. But there is one character who truly just detests Jimmy, even more than Timmy did in his debut. More than Jimmy hates Christopher Reeve even, and that is Nathan.
I can't stand him, Mimsy. That Jimmy kid makes my fucking skin crawl.
Nathan is another kid in the special ed class at South Park, and he's introduced as a drug dealer who gets Jimmy into steroids for the Special Olympics. But later, Nathan develops a severe hatred of Jimmy in a primarily one-sided rivalry. Jimmy definitely does not seem to be as aware of Nathan's disdain for him. It seems to stem from summer camp, because of these annual summer camp games. Jimmy is the captain for the blue team, while Nathan is the captain for the red team, and Jimmy's team wins every single year. Rather than trying to actually succeed at the games, Nathan tries to sabotage Jimmy the entire time, even trying to kill him by putting C4 in his ukulele. But Nathan is sort of the Wile E. Coyote to Jimmy's Roadrunner. He continually tries to sabotage him or hurt him, only to get the brunt of it himself. Even sort of a more serious storyline in Season 19's Ad Trilogy, this ends up being the case. While Jimmy works with the government to try and figure out how to combat the evolution of ads, Nathan works with the ads and successfully kidnaps Jimmy. He holds him hostage at gunpoint in the apartment he paid for with his ad money, and though it appears as though Nathan really got the upper hand here, eventually Jimmy wins over Nathan's girlfriend Classy, who then beats the shit out of him. This dynamic reemerges in Season 21's Moss Piglets as well. Nathan is convinced he'll beat Jimmy and Timmy in the science fair with their volcano experiment, but Jimmy and Timmy are working with actual tardigrades. They're doing like real science.
Where the fuck did you learn about these things?
Honestly, Nathan is a really funny character. Let me know if you'd like to see a video about him at some point. But even with that one-sided rivalry, it doesn't seem like Jimmy really hates anybody. Outside of Christopher Reeve, of course. Though, he certainly doesn't have much love for Cartman, and for pretty great reasons. Obviously, Cartman is just sort of the worst, but Jimmy has been the brunt of this a few times. In Casa Bonita, Cartman asks Jimmy the secret to acting nice to people. Jimmy gives him some genuine advice, and Cartman just instantly uses him to try to win over Kyle.
Take that, Jimmy, and that! And don't you ever talk bad about Kyle again! Kyle is my friend!
In the episode, Tst, Cartman tries to crash at Jimmy's house when his mom hires Caesar Milan to get him to behave.
We've always been best friends. We know everything about each other.
What's my last name? God damn it.
In Breast Cancer Show Ever, after Wendy beats the shit out of Cartman, Jimmy says to his face how he really feels about him.
We've always thought you suck.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Our opinion of you can't possibly go any lower.
And this was even before the fish sticks incident, where Jimmy wrote a groundbreaking joke and Eric did literally everything he could to take credit from him. Cartman drags Jimmy onto talk shows so they can hype up their joke, when Jimmy actually just cares about comedy fundamentally and making people laugh.
Well, Ellen, the truth of the matter is that there's never really been a team like us before.
But by the end of the episode, Cartman not only had taken partial credit, he took all of the credit and insulted Jimmy as some kind of sociopath in the process, basically projecting everything he represents onto poor Jimmy, who is one of the nicest dudes in South Park.
Jimmy, I owe you an apology. I realize now you can't help believing you created the entire joke, because your ego won't let you think otherwise.
And in season 20, Jimmy even takes part in destroying all of Cartman's devices, assuming he was the infamous internet troll Skank Hunt 42. It shows how he really feels about Cartman, but it also ultimately sort of represents a lapse in something else that is really important to Jimmy's character, his moral compass. And though he does have a very strong code of ethics that he truly believes in, Jimmy also seems to fall the hardest when upholding those morals sometimes.
This isn't the news. This is a travesty.
Alongside Jimmy's genuine and kind nature comes some pretty strong moral fortitude. For the most part, over the course of the series, Jimmy is shown to be pretty selfless and follow his own code of ethics. One of his earliest appearances is the all-time classic Return of the Fellowship to the Two Towers, where he joins the boys in their quest to return a porno tape to a video store in another town. Which means the 6th graders are desperate to get their hands on it, and Jimmy selflessly sacrifices himself to try and stop those 6th graders while en route to the store.
You shall not live! You shall not live!
Obviously, we've talked about fish sticks and how Cartman sort of dragged Jimmy down a path he wasn't interested in with their joke. Jimmy didn't see comedy as something that should be commodified the way Cartman did. He was happy enough making people laugh with a great joke. This goes hand in hand with his journey in the episode Funny Bot. Jimmy hosts the Comedy Awards, which is the same sort of commodification he protested in Fish Sticks. And when the Comedy Awards lead to the creation of Funny Bot, a massive comedy sensation who has put in countless TV shows and movies, Jimmy relearns what's at stake when comedy is commodified in the same way.
What's the matter is this funny bot has taken the humanity out of comedy. I don't think things are better, I think they're worse.
Many of Jimmy's stories focus on his moral compass. In Quest for Ratings, Jimmy co-anchors the school news, but when Craig's low-effort show annihilates them in ratings, they desperately try to change their program to cater to the audience. Obviously, this is mostly about how reality TV was changing the landscape of television, and a scathing indictment of how real-life news shows adjusted in response, but in the episode, Jimmy is the one person who really seems to take issue with the way they're treating journalism.
This isn't the news. This is a travesty.
He gets an interview with the vice president, but they won't show it because they think it's too boring. Jimmy is the only one in the group who has a moral objection to the ethics of their quote-unquote reporting.
This isn't the news. This is a bastardized quest for ratings.
Journalism actually becomes a major thing that Jimmy is interested in moving forward. In season 19, he's shown to be the editor of the school newspaper, the Super School News. Jimmy defends one of his writers' decisions to use the R word in that newspaper and stands his ground against PC Principal, refusing to allow him to censor the paper. The core issue here being that Jimmy won't let any kind of overseeing governing body determine what can and can't be reported on in his paper. The use of the word itself isn't really the issue, it's the idea that an outside force can dictate the news itself. Jimmy fights for this right tooth and nail and even begins distributing the paper himself when PC Principal insists that he has to approve it before it's distributed.
Suck my dick, PC Principal.
But there are absolutely instances where Jimmy's moral compass falters in pretty major ways. One of the biggest Jimmy episodes is Up the Down Steroid when he's competing in the Special Olympics. He's convinced by Nathan to start using steroids to train, which is probably the least ethical thing Jimmy has ever done. And even worse, in his roid rage, he beats up his girlfriend and mother, truly the most horrible thing we've ever seen him do. Jimmy obviously learns his lesson and makes amends, but he does have an unfortunate tendency to fall pretty harshly when it comes to these ethical quandaries. He even seems to succumb to peer pressure in some situations. In Ginger Kids, he, alongside a few others, bully one of the Gingers pretty brutally.
You can't eat in the cafeteria.
How come? Ginger kids eat in the hallway.
Yeah, go on, beat it.
And in Freemium Isn't Free, he's hired by the Canadian government to peddle freemium games to kids, all because he needs to pay off his own freemium gaming debts. Granted, in this situation, he had dug a pretty big hole for himself and deeply regretted it, so there's some empathy for his plight. But while Jimmy is definitely one of the most honest and genuine kids in town, he's certainly not without his faults, obviously. The latest Jimmy storyline actually highlights what is probably the most nuanced moral situation that he's ever faced. In the episode Japanese Toilets, it's revealed that Jimmy wrote an article about the truth behind the true level of control that toilet paper companies have over the United States. And though he felt morally obligated to bring this to light, those companies came after him.
They took everything from me, Stan. My bike, my cat. They were gonna sue my parents for what I wrote in the school paper.
This is such a fascinating place to put Jimmy, where his moral compass is truly put to the test. He had already refused to kneel to PC Principal in regards to what he publishes in the school paper, but now there's an even greater threat pressing down on him. It forces Jimmy to ask such a difficult question. Do you maintain your journalistic integrity, or do you risk your family's financial ruin? Jimmy obviously chose to protect his family. And Jimmy's love of his parents is another major example of his genuine kindness and his integrity, because though his parents seem to be supportive, generally loving parents, they've also made some absolutely horrific implications about Jimmy before, specifically that he himself is their punishment for making fun of disabled kids when they were younger.
You were sent here through the vengeful and angry hand of God to teach your mother and I a lesson.
All things considered, Jimmy could have been a resentful, angry young kid, but the fact that he remains so caring and positive with such a strong sense of right and wrong is a real testament to his character. There's a reason he made such a big impact on not only the world of South Park, but on Matt and Trey, who chose to elevate him from a one-off character to a series regular. He's a good kid, but he's not without his flaws, and his unique perspective brings a lot to the show. South Park is a better place with Jimmy Valmer in it.
Johnny! Believe it or not, I actually used to have a friend who reminded me a lot of Jimmy. Not the way he walked, but the way he talked. Really bad lisp. One time we went to McDonald's to get hot and spicy chicken sandwiches because they was only $1 at the time, right? We was living in the projects. So a hot and spicy was a Thanksgiving dinner to your boy back then. You feel me? We get up in there, we all order our hot and spicy chicken sandwiches. The homie goes up to the counter, his name was Davis. He looks the McDonald's employee right in the face, right into the windows of her soul. And when she asks him, "Excuse me, sir, what would you like today?" He says, "I would like a hot and spicy chicken sandwich." And when he said that, we chuckled a little bit, but we didn't full out laugh. And the reason why we laughed at Davis so much was because he would frequently rob us for our stuff. But on the other hand, we kept kicking it with him because he had the most attractive sisters in all of the projects. Let's just say it was a friendship that was well worth it. So then the McDonald's employee, obviously not being able to understand what he said, asked him, "Excuse me, sir, can you repeat that?" Davis looks her in the face and says, "Yes, I said a hot and spicy chicken sandwich." And that's when we lost it, bro. When I tell you everybody in the McDonald's started laughing, the only person that was not laughing was Davis and the McDonald's employee that kept asking him to repeat his order. She made him repeat it 7 times. It's only funny because he just kept stealing from us. With that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to comment, like, and/or subscribe. It's your boy BlastphamousHD. Twizzles.